Good old fighting games. I have a very interesting relationship with them. When I was younger, they were nothing but fun party games with friends and family, but now I strive to improve in most aspects of the respective game I'm playing. I know I'll never become the greatest of all time, but I like to believe that my general fundamentals are due to lots of experience with multiple fighting games, and that allows me to hold my own and possibly stand a chance against others who are actually better than me. There's a satisfaction when you learn something new in a fighting game and you're able to put it to good use against actual people, but at the cost of ruining your mental whenever you play. Currently, I'm on a long and much needed hiatus from fighting games because of general fatigue, as well as Tekken 8 not being fun right now. But what about our big red behemoth Nintendo? How would they go about creating fighting games of their own? As we know, Nintendo is one of the big three video game companies, video games and consoles alike. Their definition of fighting games is a far cry from quite literally everything else. You'll see them publish fighting games for their consoles, although as convenient as it may sound to play Mortal Kombat 1 on your Switch, I highly recommend not investing your time and money on the toaster version of a bad fighting game. This is coming from the guy who did the same thing with Mortal Kombat 11. And yes, I regret everything, but I'm not insane enough to subdue you to that torture. You don't deserve to suffer through that like I did. Anyway, let's talk about arms. According to Google, the arm is the upper limb extending from your shoulder to the hand, insanely versatile for a variety of different uses. No, but seriously, one of Nintendo's most ambitious projects at the time was a unique fighting game known as ARMS, one of the Switch's first major games during the first year of its lifespan, but an unfortunate case of never going far enough with its concept. I think ARMS is a cool game, but it never saw the light of day because of more important games for the Switch at the time, especially during the first year and what was coming in the future. Hopefully we can see it come back, but I'm not betting on it anytime soon. Amazing soundtrack though. Let's head back to 1999, the final year before the new millennium where everyone believed that the world was going to end. To think we went through the same thing in recent times and people actually believed that for about 2 weeks. A very interesting year for gaming. The only major console to be released was the Dreamcast, so that says a lot about what was going on this year. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Unreal Tournament, Final Fantasy VIII, Age of Empires 2, Tekken Tag Tournament, Tales of the Sword Coast, Pac-Man World, and some funny obscure titles, Superman 64, Crazy Taxi, and probably the greatest debate for the best game of all time, Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, and Pepsi Man. I could have grown up with this and died happy. The Nintendo 64 would give us Donkey Kong 64 and the first spawn of Satan. But I want to give special attention to the beginning of a phenomenon. One of Nintendo's greatest concepts that brings their IPs together, quite literally, but not, what is wrong with me? Super Smash Bros., a game where Nintendo icons would beat the fuck out of each other, and this was 100% the correct answer. Starting with 12 characters amongst the most popular at the time, featuring Jigglypuff, it was one hell of an idea and it worked beautifully. Luckily, it only got better from there when we get to 2001, the magnum opus that is Super Smash Bros. Melee on the GameCube. Expanded roster, fast-paced and satisfying gameplay, new game modes, America's proper introduction to Fire Emblem, Melee took a huge step forward from the previous game. In my opinion, it has become a cultural icon for Nintendo gaming. It set a new standard for future titles. That leads us to the big question. How could they match or top a game that's still getting major praise to this day? Well, that leads us to our main topic. So this grand story starts at E3 2005. Nintendo legend Satoru Iwata would announce the confirmation of the next installment of the Super Smash Bros. Franchise, currently being in development for the Nintendo Wii with the addition of online compatibility. A big step to take, especially in the early 2000s when online gaming was a major niche. Although the hero of this journey, Masahiro Sakurai, was shocked at the announcement because no one told him about the possibility of another Smash Bros. Title after Melee, at least not anytime soon. Iwata knew he wanted Sakurai back at the helm for the next installment, and thank God he agreed and got to work in October. Good lord, imagine if anyone else had Smash Bros. To develop. Oh my god, it would be terrible. E3 2006 comes around and it is confirmed to the gaming world that Super Smash Bros. Brawl is next up for the Nintendo Wii. Holy shit, this announcement trailer going from Melee graphics to the new gritty and semi-realistic graphics of this new project is so damn cool. It never gets old. For those who are able to follow the game's announcements through the Smash Dojo, I would love to know what that experience was like. Getting weekly information that was everything Smash Bros. Brawl. I was able to do that with Smash 4 and Ultimate, but holy hell, this must have felt like the greatest fever dream that you've ever had. Not only that, but you also just had to be there for it. Unfortunately, I wasn't because I was insanely young and stupid. These updates would start on May 22nd, 2007 and ending on on April 14th, 2008. Characters, stages, items, music, etc. A great way to keep up while staying in the waiting room. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was released on the Nintendo Wii first in Japan on January 31st, 2008, March 9th, 2008 in North America, June 26th, 2008 in Australia, and a day later in Europe. Shout out to my Europeans, that wait must have been torture. Apparently, Brawl went through its fair share of delays. In North America, the initial release date was set for December 3rd, 2007, but the development team needed more time to fine-tune the final product. After that, the Americas were hopeful for a February 10th, 2008 release date, but then got delayed yet again for its official release on March 9th. Japan also went through a delay, but it wasn't as significant since they only delayed the game a week of the initial release date that they were hoping for. Australia and Europe were ready to go and just needed to play the waiting game for half a year. Also, I think it's safe to say that everyone can relate to hearing their Wii or Wii U fighting for its life trying to load anything while playing this game. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at one of the Wii's best-selling games and a nostalgic favorite. This is Super Smash Bros. Brawl. So let's get the gameplay behind us quickly because there are much more exciting topics to go over. Super Smash Bros. Is a very unique fighter as it takes elements of a 2D platformer and fighting game mechanics to create a platform fighter. The gameplay and general control of your character is a lot more flexible than your average fighting game. One of the biggest elements that sets it apart from most fighting games is being able to play with up to 4 people at once instead of just 2. A big reason why some consider this game strictly a party game and not a fighting game. That's a debate in its own right that I'm not going to dive into, but I'm team party fighting game. The general gameplay is split into 3 different modes: fighting with a time limit and come out on top with the most points from KOing your competition; the classic stocks mode, you set a number of stocks and whoever gets to 0 first loses; and the very unique coin mode. It's just like coin runners from Mario Kart but more violent. Most coins wins, but you can beat them out of Yoshi's nose if you want to. You can turn on handicaps, different damage ratios, and play around with whatever items you want to spawn, as well as how often they spawn onto the battlefield. Now let's talk about the actual combat. On the surface, it's very simple. Use your moveset to damage the opposition. The higher the damage percentage goes up, the further they fly when getting hit by specific attacks. Send your enemies flying off screen to take either a point or a stock. Things obviously get more complicated when you add in the variety of character movesets, jumping, and the stages you play on. Now every character has a set number of moves they can use when in battle: a basic jab, 3 tilts, a dash attack, 4 specials, and 3 smash attacks, as well as 5 aerial attacks. You can defend yourself with the shield bubble or use 3 different dodges: spot dodge in place without moving, dodge roll left or right while grounded, and air dodge. You can also allow characters to enjoy your warm embrace by grabbing them, pummeling your head into their skull, and throwing them off the stage. I promise, what you're seeing right now is a very healthy friendship. Items bring in extra chaos to the battlefield, and new to the franchise is the Smash Ball that allows for a final smash, a super move that does tons of damage or inflict different effects on the competition. I'll go deeper into that later. So overall, the gameplay of Smash Bros is still very similar to its predecessors, but there's a huge difference between Melee and Brawl. The pacing feels 10 times slower than Melee's fast as fuck action. This led to major disappointment in the competitive scene because I believe they were expecting the pacing to be just as fast as Melee, but Brawl is very floaty and it takes time to get things going. You can still play this game quick and fast paced, but I feel like that depends on the characters you choose. Because of the slower speed, it can make the combat feel less impactful, but regardless, I still like it after all these years, and that's all that matters to me. Also, I'm gonna mention the other known elements of general gameplay later on. I'm not dumb enough to not talk about smart bombs. Now we move on to the most anticipated and most talked about aspect of Smash Bros, the roster. Brawl gives us 16 new characters while everyone else we see here is making their return. When you boot up the game for the first time, you start with 25 characters and you have to unlock the remaining 14, coming to a total of 29. Coming to a total of 39 characters in total. Let's put the spotlight on the newcomers, and here's a quote that most players probably said about one of these characters: "Who the fuck is Pit?" Complete and utter confusion, that's what he is. At the time, there was only one Kid Icarus game back in the 80s that only 3 people played, and I like to believe that Nintendo wanted to give that franchise a proper introduction with a new game, but we wouldn't get that until Uprising on the 3DS in 2012. Comparing Pit to his later counterparts, Brawl Pit feels super ambitious with its gameplay, but luckily it gets better and feels more complete when you get to Ultimate, but in my opinion in Brawl, I'm not a fan. I really don't like his side B, honestly, especially going up against it, because you can can get stuck in that thing for like 4 seconds and it fucking sucks. As you can tell, I don't like pitting this game. I like to think 1985 was a good year for gaming considering it was on the brink of collapse, but our savior is here making his Smash debut. What do you mean Mario is already here? I'm talking about Rob. Imagine if the NES was a playable character. I have come to terms with the fact that Rob is a playable character for Smash Bros. Before a lot of other characters. He may not have his own game or his own franchise, but I'd like to see him as a representation of the NES's legacy. Although he sucks major ass in Brawl. Definitely my least favorite iteration of him, but similar to Pit, his gameplay gets better with future appearances. Next up is the only character to fart in your face and nothing will be said. Here's the thing, I'm so indifferent towards Wario in this game, mainly because of how robotic his movement feels, more so than the actual robot character. Very choppy animation that throws me off whenever I want to pick him up. For me, there's a bit of a theme when it comes to the Brawl newcomers. Gameplay wise, they start off really rough in their debut, but by Ultimate they get better and feel playable. I'm not the biggest fan of Wario's super robotic animation because it just doesn't feel right to me. You could easily argue that's a part of his WarioWare style. I can understand that because this is technically WarioWare Wario and not Mario Wario, but my point still stands. Although I would definitely pick him up more than Pit or Rob. Next up is the new Fire Emblem rep, being Ike. And to think, after this we will get 5 more. I can understand wanting to give him the spotlight as the newest character of that franchise, but it would have been nice to have Roy come back, but honestly Ike is very whatever in my eyes when it comes to his gameplay. Once again, it took some time for him to catch my eye later on in Ultimate, and now we have the greatest penguin to ever grace our consoles in battle. Yes, Solid Snake, King Dedede is a penguin. This goofball is very unique in his combat style, a hard hitter with the ability to fly that isn't Charizard. Imagine if that was overpowered in any sense of the word. Tossing Gordos and Waddle Dees at your enemies will never not be fun. Although in Brawl he doesn't use his hammer to launch them, he just yeets them for the funnies. But depending on which ally he throws, it'll have different properties, so there's variety here. He also has a huge charging down special, but it's high risk, high reward. DDD is a lot of fun, but he gets tiresome after a bit for me. But moving on from that, I've heard amazing things about the Pikmin series, especially the first 2 games, but I always saw myself wondering who the fuck Olimar is. A very interesting pick with what I believe to be the most unique gameplay out of Brawl's newcomers. Using a variety of Pikmin with different properties during combat, you can have up to 6 random Pikmin at once: red, blue, yellow, white, and purple. They form a line behind Olimar, and whoever is closest to him will be up next for use in combat. It took way longer than it should have for me to appreciate this amazing design for a Smash Bros character. Olimar in general has grown on me a lot when playing him. The Pikmin being the heart and soul of the character is very poetic because whenever you don't have any Pikmin at your side, you lose out on all specials, aerials, and smash attacks. You can only jab and use tilts with Olimar alone. Also, the strategy of how many Pikmin to have at once is very sound. The more Pikmin you have, the more susceptible they are to being attacked and killed by the enemy, but you'll be able to do the most with 6, and you get the best recovery Olimar has access to, and it's the opposite if you have less than 4 at a time. So you have to take a risk regardless of how many Pikmin you have. If you ever participated in a Brawl tournament with solo Olimar, I don't know if you're super funny or out of your goddamn mind. And if I told myself that about 4 years ago, I would be stranded in the middle of nowhere wondering where it all went wrong. But you know what did go wrong? That motherfucker Meta Knight. Holy shit, they managed to create the most broken character in the franchise's history at the time. You can argue 64 Pikachu and Melee Fox, but Meta Knight was the definition of a problem during Brawl. The absolute peak of this character, cool as fuck concept wise, insanely fun to play, but made the competitive scene super goddamn boring and predictable for me whenever I saw Meta Knight. The power of DLC before DLC became mainstream in gaming. He is the meta and will always be infamous within the world of Smash Bros for his grand debut. Now, as we simmer down, surprisingly Diddy Kong is a character I'm not a fan of, despite my playtime with him in Ultimate. It's the same thing, I'm not the biggest fan of this character in Brawl, but he is manageable. It's kind of like Wario, where I still pick him up, but I'm not happy about it. The main reason because of the floaty nature Brawl presents. I don't feel as quick as I want to be. I expect to play similar to how I play Fox or Sheik. Quick attacks, good frames, all over the place, but I can't really pull that off with Diddy Kong like I can in future titles, which is really unfortunate. Here's another character that gets the spotlight in the distant future, as well as a reminder that this character exists, Toon Link. For some reason we had to replace Young Link for probably an even younger Link. As much as I love Wind Waker, Toon Link in Brawl is a very forgettable character for me. At least Bowser is memorable for being a fucking vegetable in this game, but Toon Link is super whatever here. But unlike him, we now have Pokemon's Goku. Let's be honest here, Lucario has one of the weakest designs in the series, but it's an amazing concept overall. As soon as the match starts, Lucario is the weakest character in the entire game, but as it goes on, you take damage and slowly get stronger. The most high risk, high reward character. The risk is taking tons of damage and being one shot away from death, but being insanely strong. This is Lucario's aura mechanic. The more damage you take, the stronger you become, but once you die, you start from square one. I love this idea, but because you're at your most vulnerable when it comes to your damage percentage, by the time you gain the strength, you're one random smash attack away from having to go back to your weakest state. Almost every single attack in Lucario's moveset is based around this aura mechanic. I can't stress how much I like this design in theory. Imagine starting a gunfight with no ammo until you get shot. But how does controlling 3 characters in one sound? Sounds fun, right? If you want to count Pikmin, then technically 7. But Pokemon Trainer is absolutely amazing. One of my favorite characters, being able to switch between Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard. The OG 3 starters going through the evolution is very smart. And as much as I prefer to play Venusaur, Charizard is very fun to play, regardless of my general thoughts on Charizard as a Pokemon. Also, the anatomy of the Pokemon evolution forms makes a lot of sense. Squirtle is the most agile of the 3 baby forms, Ivysaur makes the most sense for the mid-evolution, and I'd rather control Charizard over Blastoise any day of the week, even though shooting water cannons at Snake sounds like a literal blast. This character is awesome. For those who are unaware, fun fact, Samus has boobs, and let's be real, she's seen better days. Zero Suit Samus makes her debut and she feels like Sheik if she had a gun. I like how unique she fights from her armored counterpart, and just like most characters, Zero Suit Samus gets better and more fun in Smash 4 and Ultimate. Okay, there's a slight possibility that what I'm about to say next is controversial. Lucas is my 4th favorite character in the game, but mainly because I'm very enamored with the character in Ultimate. It makes his appearance in Brawl a far cry from where he is now, and he's come a long way since 2008. A child with PSI powers who hits you insanely hard for no reason, although it's a damn shame that he's depicted as a wimp in subspace, but I'm sure he has his reasons, but realistically, I have no fucking clue. PK Freeze, a healing orb, PK Fire, and a very underwhelming recovery for me. Nothing too crazy honestly, just lots of fun to play. Now, we got 2 surprise characters that make their debut, and this basically tells us players that any character could be a part of this roster. First up is solid motherfucking Snake. Bring in the military weaponry because Yoshi has evaded taxes for the last time. I love the contrast of characters with supernatural powers, skills, and abilities. Then here comes a military trained human being with grenades and homing missiles. Hide in your box and hope you don't get set on fire because there's more fire than you think coming from these characters. Snake is a great addition. A gaming icon, and I'm very glad that he is one of the first third-party characters that gets to join the battle. Sonic the Hedgehog, on the other hand, I share the same sentiment. I love this character. No matter how you feel about the franchise as a whole, he is an icon for gaming, both positive and negative, which says a lot. It would make zero sense if we didn't get Sonic at this point in the franchise. His gameplay is exactly what you'd think. He turns into a ball 80% of the time, but despite the limitations of his overall moveset, he's still incredibly fun due to his insane speed on the ground. And finally, we get to my universal main, Star Wolf. Another far cry from his Ultimate variation, but luckily almost everything gameplay wise is very similar with minor differences between iterations, but Wolf is without a doubt my favorite character in the entire series of games, despite only having 2 appearances. The returning characters really don't have anything interesting going on with them other than Bowser moving like he's in a fucking wheelchair. I really appreciate the variety of franchises we got from the newcomers this time around, as well as expanding familiar franchises. Oh yeah, don't forget about Rob. A good roster overall, even if we're missing Mewtwo and Roy. To think they chose Game & Watch over those 2. Now we land onto the franchise's magnum opus, one of the greatest no dialogue stories ever told, Brawl's own Subspace Emissary. I am getting chills just thinking about it. An amazing campaign where we follow the entire roster to go fight the Butterfly God. The world is at risk of being consumed by multiple black hole level threats. On the side of gameplay, it's a 2D platformer with fighting game elements. Defeat the enemies in your path and survive. So many unique areas to explore. The character interactions are insanely fun to watch every single time. Very unique boss fights, being able to customize your combat experience with stickers you collect. Let's be real, 99% of us have never used this because we never paid attention to this feature, but it's so fun fucking cool. You can put stickers on the characters you have available, and it'll give them some type of buff or gameplay effect. The part that I like about this the most is that every character can have their own combination of stickers instead of only making one set that carries over to another character. So you can play to your character's strengths and movesets by giving them certain stickers. It's such a cool element, and the regret is filling me with displeasure that I made myself skip this part for years. And I hate that I ignored it for as long as I did. Stickers come in all shapes and sizes, so you'll be limited to a certain amount, but it mainly depends on how you play that card. You can go for a ton of really small stickers with very small boosts, or you can go for bigger stickers that give you a bigger number of boosts. I mainly say that, but that's wrong. Instead of bigger numbers, multiple, I'm mainly talking about going from 1 attack strength to 13 attack strength. The locations are fun to navigate, especially if there are puzzles involved. The variety of enemies can bring a challenge depending on what difficulty you're playing on. Granted, most of them are generally standard enemies, although I'll be honest, there are a fair share of enemies that make me want to jump off the halberd itself. But the bosses, these bosses are really fucking cool. Rayquaza, both variations of Ridley, Gallium, Duon, Porky, Master and Crazy Hand, and the greatest butterfly I've ever laid eyes on in a video game, Taboo. Surprisingly, the boss list is actually smaller than you would think, but the quality is off the charts for me. Speaking of, once you enter subspace for the first time, you see Taboo and the power he has. It's crazy that he basically puts us back to square one. Everyone is back to their trophy form and all hope is lost. And then there's DDD, Ness, and the GOAT Luigi ready to casually save the world. This is basically the second half of the campaign where you have to rebuild your squad, travel through the lands we traversed earlier, and save everyone from their life as an amiibo before amiibo were a thing. Taboo has gathered so much power that we have to fight our way to him through a gauntlet of levels and boss fights known as the Great Maze. We travel through past areas we've already traversed, and we have to defeat shadow versions of our roster as well as the bosses. We will eventually come across the place where we can fight Taboo, but this will show you the progress you've made when it comes to the unique battles themselves. Once you defeat everybody, then you can take on the God of Butterflies, or I guess the Butterfly God. There are a bunch of doors that lead to different areas or a fight. The fight against Taboo is absolute insanity, and we get to use 6 warriors of our choice instead of the usual 4 that we get to use throughout the entire campaign. This is how strong crystal metamorphosis can be. So if you ever run into a crystal looking butterfly at any point in your life, go to another planet and begin a new civilization. My favorite part of this entire series of games are the cutscenes and character interactions. I got so nostalgic watching these again. The characters interacting carries this entire game, and not a single word is said the entire time. So many great moments. Mario vs Kirby, every cutscene with these 5 characters, Captain Falcon's entrance, Peach, Sheik, and Fox enjoying some tea, Taboo becoming almighty by getting rid of the entire team, and so many more. Nothing but fast-paced action, amazing interactions with the roster. It's a damn shame we don't get to see the full roster in action during the first half. Sonic, Wolf, Jigglypuff, and Toon Link are treated like post-game content, and you can unlock them for the campaign much later on. Luckily, once you do gain access to these characters, you can take them into the final boss against Taboo. Overall, Subspace Emissary is amazing. The stories, characters, gameplay. The only downside for me are annoying enemies and some of the areas being somewhat generic, but it doesn't get better than this. Quite literally, because World of Light was super underwhelming. So, other than Subspace being an amazing piece of content, there is so much more to do in this game. I like to think there's more content than both Smash 4 and Ultimate combined. Wouldn't be surprised if that is true. Funny enough, I have hope that this might work. Well, you can't say I didn't try. 6 modes in total, but really 3 that matter. Group mode is where the standard game modes are. Solo if you're lonely like me, and the Vault, an absolute goldmine of extra content. Starting off with the group mode. The versus mode is where the main game takes place most of the time. Customize the rules to your heart's content and enjoy some classic Smash Brothers gameplay. Next up is the rotation mode. This was 8-player Smash before 8-player Smash, although instead of 8 players at once, you can have up to 16 players at once, and after every match, you swap out with another player depending on the rules you set for how many players swap out. Jesus Christ. It is very interesting and a good way to get everyone in on the fun instead of having 4 players and 12 spectators not playing at all. Next up is a personal favorite of mine, the tourney mode. A classic game mode that needs to be in more fighting games. The goal is simple. Fight your way through the bracket and take the trophy for yourself. Customize what characters you want to participate, set the rules, and hope you don't lose against a level 1 Jigglypuff in round 1. My only issue with this mode is that you have to manually choose to not watch the CPUs fight until it's your time to play. I'd rather rather much every match happen at the same time until your match is over, and it goes on until there's a champion crowned, but regardless, I love this game mode. Finally, we got Special Brawl, the goofy brother to Versus mode. A bunch of ways to customize the gameplay experience into a wacky shitpost of a game mode. It's a lot of fun every now and again, and it's a Smash Bros must-have for every game. Now, moving on to the solo content. There's a decent amount to do here. Also, real quick, solo is a damn lie because you can play these modes with one other player, but that's neither here nor there. Brawl's classic mode is very polarizing in my eyes, mainly because you're going the same route for every single character you play this mode with. It's the same format instead of a unique classic mode for said character, kinda like Ultimate's classic mode. You go up against the same franchises of characters within their route. There's no depth unique to your character, no boss fights outside of Master Hand at the very end, as well as Crazy Hand if he feels like showing up. It's insanely linear. You have no idea how many times I fought Metal Olimar and Giant Zero-Suit Samus. The most variety you get from this mode is the final round before you go up against Master Hand. It's a free-for-all against 3 random characters on Final Destination. That's it. I went on to complete it with every character though. I regret nothing. Next up are the events. Now this is what I believe what the playable rounds in classic mode should be like. Very unique and characteristic to whoever you're playing. A total of 41 single player events and 21 co-op events. Some of my favorites consist of mainly the all-star battles, but as well as Dark Link Duel, the Ultimate Bodyguard, Advent of the Evil King, High-Tech Special Forces, The Wolf Hunts the Fox, and the final 2 events known as the Final Battle and the Final Battle. I completed all of these on normal difficulty, but I noticed a very progressive rise in said difficulty because it took me so fucking long to complete the last 3 challenges. Having to deal with snake projectiles, Sonic's blazing fast movement, and Mega Mario in general was one hell of a ride, especially when I realized that they all had 2 stocks, so that added on more stress to this final event. And this was my very first time completing it. Although there were some challenges that were just super whatever. Bird in the Darkest Night, Flower Blooms in the Echoes, which is a great idea but took way longer than it should have, Power Suit On because it's super boring and standard, and Sleeping in the Eggs because Kirby and Pikachu don't know how to stay fucking still for 3 seconds. But overall, I really enjoyed the events. Plus I have no reason to do co-op events because I'm lonely. Have I mentioned that yet? I think I haven't mentioned that yet, so that'll forever be a mystery to me. All-Star mode is a multi-man brawl with extra steps. A gauntlet going up against the entire roster but in rounds instead of a traditional multi-man brawl. My issue with this game mode is that every fight you go up against characters of a franchise, so all Mario characters, Fire Emblem characters, and more so how they're represented in Smash Brothers. I like the idea, but that element makes the specific mode take much longer than it should. I believe we should have combined the franchises with only one representative together within a few rounds of each other. It feels long-winded, but it does its job at a decent level. Although I do like the intermission area after completing a round and seeing the character trophies pop up in the background as you gather them up. It's a satisfying detail, but All-Star mode in general is decent at best for me. Next up is the Stadium mode. We have 4 sub-modes to go over. First up is Target Smash, and let me just say this, the most generic variation of this mode out of every game. At the very least with the past 2 games, the stages were based around the characters you picked, which is an insanely cool detail playing to their strengths as a character. I understand we're only going to get more characters moving forward, but if these were more creative in their gameplay and general design, as well as more stages in general instead of just 5, we could be looking at the best iteration of Target Smash. But no, it's very average. I do like level 4 and 5 being very challenging in the best ways, but the first 3 do nothing for me. Home Run Contest is a Smash Bros classic. You have 10 seconds to beat up the best character to never be playable and send him flying with the baseball bat. This is a mode that relies on trial and error. Improvement is the name of the game, figuring out what attacks work in unison and how fast you need to be in order to get a chance for a swing, because missing a point blank target is so embarrassing. Multi-Man Brawl has a variety of options to choose from. On the surface, defeat the enemies at any cost. A small gust of wind and they'll be off the screen within half a second. 10 and 100 man brawl are self-explanatory. Defeat 10 or 100 enemies as fast as possible. 3 and 15 minute brawl switches up the formula. Now you have to defeat as many enemies as you can within the time limit. And then we have Endless Brawl. Defeat as many enemies as you can until you die. And Cruel Brawl should be labeled as cruel and unusual punishment. I really like the characters we fight against being based off of Kirby, Captain Falcon, Mario, and Zelda. Speaking of which, you might run into some characters from the roster while you're making progress. It's a nice detail. I like to dabble in these every now and again, but Cruel Brawl can stay in hell. To wrap up the solo content are boss battles. Take on the gauntlet of boss fights from subspace in one go and do your best to survive. I like that we can fight the bosses separately instead of having to go back through subspace to fight them, especially after you beat the entire campaign. It's very accessible, and fighting games need this in general, especially if their story has a bunch of unique boss fights. It really is a shame that we don't get boss rush type modes in this genre as often as we used to. Now moving on to the last notable mode, without a doubt the most interesting piece of side content, the vault. There's a lot to look at, so let's dive in. Let's start small and work our way up to the big boys. The Chronicle is a nice way to take a look into the history of Nintendo titles up until Brawl's release. Not just first party titles, but a bunch of third party games as well. But there's not much to look deeper into because you can't choose a game and learn some fun facts about it. The only info you learn about a game is the year it was released and what console it was on. As you can tell, this is as of December 2007. So if we get another Chronicle in the next Smash Bros game, yeah, that's gonna be a very large list, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Y'all remember f***ing Tabletop Popeye? Next up are the album and replays. Pause the game in the middle of the action and take a pic if you so please. You can mess around with the camera and get some cool angles. You can view these photos in the album and proceed to forget about them for the rest of time. Same thing with replays, which are insanely redundant to me, but I'm making sure I cover all the bases here. And yes, all I have saved is a sample home run contest replay and 2 target smash replays. You can also forget about these until the end of time. Nothing bad will happen unless your console blows up. Next up are the masterpieces, a very intriguing piece of content. Here you can play a handful of demos of past games. Brawl presents masterpieces as a way to explore our roster's previous adventures. Well, at least some of them. I will never play Ice Climbers unironically, but being able to play Ocarina of Time and Star Fox 64 is a really cool element. But I do wish there was some Fire Emblem reps like playing a map on Path of Radiance, and I'm very surprised we don't have Pikmin with how unique that series is. To me, the biggest flaw of these masterpieces is that you only get to play them for a limited amount of time, which makes sense, but good lord, some of these times are sinful. Imagine trying to get the world record in Super Mario Bros, but you only have access to the game's demo on Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I would retire. Now onto the most ambitious mode in the entire series, Stage Builder. Who would have thought that we the people would be able to create our own unique stages? The world is our oyster and it's insanely raw, and I mean very raw in the worst ways. Despite the amazing idea of creating your own stages, Brawl's Stage Builder is very questionable at best. You can choose from 3 sizes and 3 backgrounds. We're clearly off to a terrible start. You can also choose one song to play whenever you choose to fight on this stage. Shoutouts to 1080 Snowboarding. From here, you basically have what looks like a knockoff Photoshop beta for children. You can choose different parts and add them to the stage, floors, structures, and different features alike. Each part has their own size and takes up a certain amount of space of the area you're working with. You can customize from here and create the Smash Bros stage of your dreams. This is one that came from a fever dream, and now I understand why there was hesitation to bring it back in future titles, but we knew we were gonna get those type of stages one way or another. And finally, the mode with the most miscellaneous content, trophies and stickers. Smash Bros fucking loves trophies. That love ended in 2018, unfortunately. Rest in peace. The sticker album allows us to view stickers we've collected while playing. The sticker center lets us place stickers on a canvas and do a mini photo shoot, so at the very least you can do something with these things outside of subspace, but it's definitely the most interesting there. Coin Launcher is another way to collect trophies. You use Smash coins you gather when shooting at the credits after completing either Classic mode or All-Star mode, and you go on to play Smash Bros. Galaga Pinball. It can be very addicting, especially if you have a ton of coins to spend. Definitely my favorite thing to do outside of the actual fighting. Next up is the challenge wall, where you can take on 128 challenges and get rewards ranging from stages, music, stickers, trophies, masterpieces, and custom parts to use when creating your own stage. Some of these challenges are insanely simple and easy to do, and then there's clearing all-star mode on intense difficulty that I totally completed legitimately. You can also find golden hammers that allow you to smash through a challenge you have yet to complete and just take the reward for free without having to take on said challenge. You can gather up a max of 3 to use at once, and if you see a golden hammer in a challenge spot, once you complete said challenge, you gain access to the golden hammer attached to it, and then you can use it whenever you want. It's nice to dive into some harder challenges or bullshit your way to get a trophy of a Franklin badge. Next up on the list is the trophy gallery. You can view trophies and learn about them through the short description and even get some games it appeared in. It's very similar to past games, so nothing new overall, but let's be real, trophies will always be superior to spirits despite the immense number of spirits that Ultimate has. Finally, we have the trophy hoard. Here is where we can see every single trophy we've collected in one huge area. It's cool to see this evolve the more you collect. You can even do a small trophy photo shoot if you so please. A very nice element, and I'd like to believe that there's someone out there that's super passionate about this. So that's all the game modes that matter, because who is using extensive time to figure out their control layout, or if they keep deflicker on or off? Although you could just bomb all of your save data and start from scratch like I did. The choice is yours. Now, you would think with how big this game is and how much there is to do, there will be a good number of miscellaneous topics to go into. Well, you'd be right, there are a lot, but I can only come up with 5 because my brain is slow. Also, I just went over the major elements anyway, so we're not going as deep as our last review. Starting with the most obvious, mainly because I couldn't find a better way to bring this up naturally, but Brawl brings in a brand new element to the gameplay that's very common within fighting games. The big super / ultimate / finishing attack that does a ton of damage. We are introduced to the smash ball. Whoever breaks it gains immense power and can let out a final smash. Whatever happens depends on the character, so the cool factor varies on the player's choice of character. Some of my favorites belong to Captain Falcon, Wario, Bowser, Snake, Sonic, and Concept, but there are some very questionable final smashes. Luigi dancing around like a psychopath, Zero Suit Samus, Yoshi, Ice Climbers, and others. After taking a look at all of them again after so long, I am very disappointed with most of these. How the f does Yoshi turn into a dragon, and why do I have to be reminded of the Donkey Kong bongos? But Final Smashes is a great idea to make casual playing more interesting, as well as other items in general. Speaking of the other items, while choosing your character and setting up the rules, you can customize what items can show up and how frequent they spawn. There's a wide variety of items, from healing items, sword-like weapons, throwable items like Mr. Saturn, explosives, crates, barrels, and so much more. This is where the exciting chaos of the casual side shows itself, and it's a lot of fun to dive into. Staying on the path of items, let's talk about two very special items that Nintendo for some reason wants the concept of all to themselves. The Pokeball spawns a Pokemon at random, from starters to legendaries and even Goldeen, the worst summon in the entire series of Smash Bros. But the far more interesting summon item is the grand debut of the Assist Trophy. This is where we can bring in different characters from different franchises, and they can affect the gameplay in many different ways. And I'm just gonna say this with my whole skeletal chest: I fucking hate Rossetti. That is all. Assist trophies bring so much more depth to the chaos to the world of beating up 2 pink marshmallows and a grown-ass man. I really like this addition, and it gives even more representation to different franchises, even ones that don't have playable characters. A great addition to the series. There's no way in hell I talk about Smash in full without mentioning the environments. Over the last few years, I've heavily underrated the impact of stages for a game like Smash Bros, but they are a cool way for the developers to get creative with legacy areas. We got 31 brand new stages if you don't want to include Battlefield and Final Destination, as well as 10 stages from Melee making a return. Stages come in all different shapes and sizes, from small and compact stages like Flat Zone 2 to wide and open stages like New Pork City and 75M. These stages also come with their own unique hazards to make things more chaotic. Some of my favorites consist of the ever so amazing WarioWare, PictoChat, Pokemon Stadium 2. I hate Hannonbow, Rumble Falls, and Mushroomy Kingdom, but luckily the like to dislike ratio is beyond positive. Although I wish they brought back Pokefloats. Your guess is as good as mine as to why it never came back after Melee, one of the most fun and unique stages in the franchise, stuck in 2001 until further notice. Next up is without a doubt one of my favorite aspects of this game, and I'm very happy this is something they took advantage of, and that's the codec calls for Solid Snake. This is clearly based on the iconic codec calls you can perform in the Metal Gear games, but here you'll get a brief history lesson, general strategy, as well as strengths and weaknesses for whoever you're fighting against. It's really cool, and I was very surprised seeing Slippy do one of these calls. To think, we got a Slippy Solid Snake interaction. Welcome to Smash Bros. But we're not done yet. There's one more topic I need to go to before we start wrapping things up. There's a product that made a huge impact on its own relating to Smash Bros. Brawl. It feels like a crime to talk about Brawl and not mention Project M, a fan game that improves a bunch of elements of Smash Bros. Brawl's final product. It's clear that Brawl was not the game to play competitively, mainly because tripping would make you retire on the spot. Project M is basically what competitive players were expecting for Brawl. Fast paced, ultra satisfying combat, at least introduced 5 characters in S tier instead of just 1. Not only did we see a significant improvement to the gameplay, but we got a whole new aesthetic, new stages, a huge expanded roster. Not only new characters, but even some base characters got a rework with new movesets and animation. Project M/Plus could have its own standalone slot for a future review, but it would feel wrong to not even mention it when talking about the official Nintendo product that is Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Alright, time for the grand finale. To no one's surprise, Brawl was a major commercial success worldwide. In the US on launch day, Brawl sold a staggering 874,000 units and finished its first week selling 1.4 million copies, becoming the fastest selling Nintendo game in America's history. Brawl was also the best selling game of March 2008 in the US and Canada, generating a total of $122 million in revenue during the month of March in 2008. Absolute insanity. Now moving our way to the other side of the world, Brawl reached #1 on charts in both Europe and Australia, which is no surprise. Although by the time August came around, half a year into the game's time on shelves, we got an update on sales. The United States 3.54 million, 213,000 in the UK, 1.6 million in Japan, coming to a total of around 5.4 million within the first 6 months. That's copies sold, not dollars. I forgot to write it down, I'm sorry. We're also looking at the 5th best selling video game in Japan during 2008 at 1.7 million copies sold, the 4th best selling game of 2008 in the US with 4.17 million copies sold, and as of March 2021, Super Smash Bros. Brawl is the 8th best selling Wii game, sitting at 13.32 million copies sold. I took a look to see if it cracked the all-time top 100 in sales, but just taking a look at the top 50, I highly doubt it's in the top 100, but it's probably closer than I think, but I guess I'll never know. Now let's take a look at some general critiques for this game that doesn't involve tripping. Not a single mention of tripping once. Metacritic 93 out of 100, Destructoid 9.5 out of 10, Games Radar Plus perfect 5 out of 5, Nintendo Life 9 out of 10, Official Nintendo Magazine 95 out of 100. But you know the drill by now, let's dive deeper into some specifics. Famitsu comes in with a perfect 40 out of 40, praising the variety and depth of the single player content, the unpredictability of Final Smashes, and the dynamic fighting styles of the characters. Out of all of that, the only aspect I personally disagree with is the Final Smash unpredictability, because once you learn what every Final Smash does, you'll know exactly who has the best Final Smashes as well as the best way to counter said Final Smashes. But I highly doubt players will choose a character based on how good their Final Smash is, but that person definitely exists, and whatever makes you happy, you do you. Nintendo Power joins in on the fun with another perfect score, stating Brawl as one of Nintendo's greatest products they've ever produced. As much as I love Brawl and believe it to be great, that just feels like a reach because that brings in the conversation of all Nintendo games, not just Smash Bros. Now this is clearly at the time of the game's release in 2008, so everything before that is on the table. Now I personally don't like to compare games of different genres, but do you believe Brawl keeps up with Goliath like a majority of Zelda games, Metroid Fusion, the Prime Trilogy, Pokémon Generations 2 and 3, a large handful of Mario games? Brawl is a great game in my opinion, but it is at the door and knocking to become one of Nintendo's all-time greatest, but I believe there's a ton that overshadow it. Next up is GameSpot with a 9.5 out of 10. They focus on Brawl's simple controls and gameplay, making it remarkably accessible to beginners yet still appealing to veterans. Very true. Brawl is basically the idea of being fun for all skill levels by not catering to one or another. For me, that's what fighting games need to do more often, instead of pondering to one or the other. Yes, I'm looking at you. Eurogamer comes in with a 9 out of 10, praising the game's ability to stay fun in both single player and multiplayer modes, while fulfilling its usual role of dominating a willing crowd's evening into the early hours, and now allowing you to sustain that after friends gone home. Basically playing for hours on end, but also being able to continue that fun once everyone goes home or falls asleep. Now personally, I've never played enough Brawl throughout the night because at the time of 2008 and 2009, I had a bedtime, but I do understand this overall feeling in general because at some point I did get older. Game Informer highlighted Brawl's finely tuned balance, core fighting mechanics, and local multiplayer modes. I don't think anything is balanced if you can trip at any random time and get JV forward. Also, Meta Knight exists, so balance can go straight to hell. IGN, 9.5 out of 10. They mentioned long loading times, which is true, but something you have to deal with. It could have been worse. We could have had Sonic 06 loading times, which will be concerning at the very least. They also mentioned subspaces, enemies, and locales being uninspired, which is fair because they are relatively generic, but you know where all the budget went outside of gameplay. Don't be surprised if you see another scar next time you see me after that. So in total, a very high average of 9.5 out of 10, which is not shocking in the slightest. There's a lot of positivity as well as some solid criticism criticism. Finally, the very small list of accolades Brawl managed to rack up during its time in the spotlight. Also, did you know that IGN at some point believed they were credible enough to give their own awards to video games? I learned about this a week ago and it's just now hitting me like a shot of fireball. Best fighting game, best local multiplayer, best original score, and game of the year. GameSpot also believed it to be the best fighting game of the year. The official Nintendo magazine put Brawl in their top 100 greatest video games of all time. Remember, we're strictly talking Nintendo. I took a look and as of this date, after 17 years, Brawl is number 79 on that list. I have no idea where it started and where it's been ever since its release, but this connects to what I was talking about earlier, of the one review claiming that Brawl is one of Nintendo's greatest products. I do believe Brawl to be a top 100 Nintendo game of all time, but strictly on the back half of that list, so I'm not against the 79 placing. To bring this to a close, Brawl feels like it doesn't take a step forward in its gameplay, but it doesn't go backwards either. When it comes to the amount of content to experience, it's something we probably will never see again for a very long time. I'm happy they committed to the characters that were planned for Melee and brought them into the next installment. Honestly, there's no character I completely hate being here. The beginning of the third-party expansion started here, and it only gets better moving forward with the next installment. Unfortunately, that I might not be able to talk about because this happened. I am very scared, but I will do my damn best to figure out a way to talk about Smash 4 in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully I don't trip and fall on my face for a 0 to death, and no, I'm never gonna get over tripping.